Keith and I often cover what's happening in Hollywood from a superficial level, just covering the goods and activities that are popping up in the moment. But today, we recognize something different's happening in Hollywood, and we want to welcome you to this conversation in Hollywood Breaks. I have an interesting question for you today, Keith, before we
Oh boy.
kind of just dive into the usual
Okay.
thoughts and processes. It feels like many of our friends are out there looking for work. I'm just on LinkedIn and I see posts and I'm
Hmm.
available to be hired, what have you. And we can read in the trades or the Times or whatever that there's a lot of layoffs, but it feels like there's going to be an upcoming change within our industry and marketplace. Are you feeling the same thing? You kind of getting the same sense?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels that way. It's interesting because, I was obviously laid off at the very beginning of the pandemic, and there was a lot of people who were still secure in their jobs. And it feels like now a lot of the sort of hangover from all of that is now starting to catch up to other industries, I think. And I think that's partially why you're seeing a lot of these layoffs starting to happen. And no one's, particularly in our industry where it relies a lot on people sitting at home or having a lot of free time, and now that's not the case anymore. So sort of, you use like Disney Plus as an example, that sort of exploded in the beginning because it launched like right before the pandemic and obviously had a wildly successful run during the pandemic. And now everyone's kind of coming off that a little punch drunk, and now you have all the layoffs that are sort of coming. But it definitely feels like there's a shift now that, I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier today. It just doesn't feel like the industry is as dynamic as it once was. And I think that's attributable to several factors. One of which is sort of like the lack of opportunity, the fact that movies don't necessarily drive the cultural conversation as much as they used to. Um, I mean, so I think it feels
Yeah,
like there's a
original user generated content creates
yes,
distraction for people.
right.
I also feel like the OTT platforms have commoditized so much when it comes to consumption that
Yeah.
the big hits of your career, as much as content is out there and opportunities to make content, the hits don't come. So nobody really knows what you did last. Or sure, you did that. That's great. That was a hit. What, 4 months ago? In the
Yeah.
meantime, another something is run
It's
its
the
course.
classic what have you done lately? Like, it's never like, I mean, the joke in theatrical marketing was always like, okay, you have Monday to celebrate, Tuesday you're on to the next, because by then on to Tuesday everyone's gonna be like, oh, what, oh, you worked on that, great, what's next? What have you done? Oh, that was like 2 weeks ago, like, moving on. Like, you don't have as much time to sort of sit back and, I guess, enjoy the spoils as much as you used to. And
Or get credit for it. So when it
yeah,
comes to retaining your job or finding
right.
opportunity, it feels passe in a way when the moment
It's
comes.
funny because you're right. There's a lot of more. It's interesting because I'm reading more about these people writing these long screeds about being laid off and trying to find a job, and it's I understand the need to emote. It's just never been me to sort of like spill my life onto a LinkedIn post, but it seems to be happening more and more. And it's interesting to me because on Deadline Hollywood this past week, they announced, they actually posted the link that the news that Bloomberg eventually broke, that the bloodbath of the layoffs at Disney are starting next week. And pretty much every day from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, except Friday, there are going to be people let go. And it's going to be across the company. I don't think the parks are going to get hit hard because they got hit hard during COVID, but I think the entertainment division, so a lot of the people you and I know, are probably sweating right now. So and it was interesting just reading the comments and just how it seems like it's this idea that it's so fear driven now. And people were saying, well, I know a guy that, someone who's worked there forever, and they didn't do anything half the time. And and then it's like, well, yeah, and then they've got all these pointless middle people who don't do anything either. And it just doesn't seem like the industry has the energy that it once did.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
I
Yeah, the
and
idea
I
of energy, having energy. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like, it's simply the article that I sent you from the Ankler this morning, like this idea that everyone's sort of fleeing the industry because it's just not, it's one, there are not enough jobs for all the people that are looking. And after Disney does their layoffs, that'll be even more true because there'll be more people looking for work. Los Angeles, the city, has some of the highest unemployment in the country. And I think it's probably going to get worse. And it's just, I don't know. It just feels like we're in a moment where the industry is, I mean, I feel like we've been in this moment, but it's sort of coming to a point where it's like, what is the future of the industry going to be if we can't bring talent in? Like, you can't bring people, it's, it's like there's not any sort of pull anymore. Like I put up this
So
poster behind me. It's
yeah,
from Jumper, and it's the tagline I love is anywhere is possible, which kind of felt like, the energetic dream factory that Hollywood was when I worked there, when I was there. And now it just feels like that is just draining. And now everyone's just gripping for life for their jobs. And, it was, I remember one of my friends at Netflix was made a joke that some people, because they make so much money at Netflix, they get these ridiculously expensive houses and then they can never leave their jobs because any other job is not going to
yeah.
pay them what they need to make to keep that house. So it's sort of like this whole, I don't know, it just feels like we're kind of caught in this
But
vicious
do you
trap.
also like? I have a feeling some of like say this anticipation or this bloodbath. It's also looking obviously not just looking at repercussions of the past, but recognizing this trend is changing. There are a
Mm,
couple of not only the technology had changed, but some big moments coming up with the writer's strike and other
yeah.
threats that are out there. The industry is saying, hey, let's industry leaders are saying, hey, let's recognize what's going to take place here and restructure the opportunities within Hollywood to build new pipelines and new means of doing projects. And as you're saying, yeah, if the majority of people in the last couple of years have worked from their house, haven't really
Mm,
participated in a community, that retention value of knowledge in the halls of a building somewhere, there's a lot of things that have taken a shift and change, and the individuals within those mechanisms are the ones that are being commoditized, pushed
mm,
out, or maybe even some have found opportunity and have expanded their roles, and they're becoming more and more important in the positions that they have. I could see this shift taking place because in one year I'm hearing, oh, layoffs, I'm afraid, or I got laid off or whatever. And the
mm.
other year I'm like, I got promoted. This is different. This is new. And I'm like, wow, it's, oh, the shift is what's taking place. It's interesting time for Hollywood. I think, what we often cover is the evolution of content itself or brand or entertainment, the
Right.
experience of consuming content from theaters to OTT and so on, and even recognition of achievement through the awards. But to kind of get into the inner workings of Hollywood a little bit and ask questions, oh, wait, if this shift is taking place, what new changes and new opportunities and new threats are going to pop themselves up? And if I'm going to navigate a career through it, what should I be doing different?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great if those questions were being asked. I'm not entirely sure that a lot of the legacy places are asking them. Like, it's interesting if you think about Netflix when they first came on the scene, they were like a bull in a china shop. Like they just completely turned the industry on its head. As we talked about last week with Anthony, like with House of Cards and like creating the binge and releasing all the episodes all at once and the spending, and it was just insane. And like what they were paying the executives was just mind-boggling. And it was just they were poaching from the studios, and it was like this revolution. And now it's like Netflix just had their quarterly earnings last week, and it was just sort of like meh. Yeah, we had a couple subscribers. They pulled back on the spending, so they're not spending like crazy. Their revenue's still up. So, they're basically become like a legacy media company. Now they're like the norm.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's almost like, okay, what's the next thing that's going to come along and shake things up? And I feel like we're kind of getting to this point because it's like if you've got all this talent that's on the street that can't find work, and the studios can't really hire anybody anymore because they just don't have the budget anymore to take on as many people with as many perks and all that stuff, then obviously with the talent, something's going to happen. Something's going to occur. And like much like with the Ankler article I sent, which was about how a lot of Hollywood people have gone into gaming,
Yeah,
and it's
I was
sort of
going to say
like
that.
maybe the transition into the gaming world, maybe gaming is going to be the next evolution, the big evolution. Like we saw it with like Super Mario Brothers is crushing it, not only because it's family fare and it's clearly, the idea that some of the studios have lost the plot a little bit because as a father with young children, having the ability to watch something that they'll enjoy and keep them occupied for 2 hours, and it's not on an iPad,
Oh yeah.
then that's gold. And it's almost like they've forgotten that a little bit. And then Universal Illumination swoop in with a timeless game property that pretty much every family plays at least once in their lifetime. Mario Kart, hello. It's like the greatest family game ever invented. And then they basically turn it into a 95-minute movie. I mean, that's what Disney used to do so well. Hour and a half movies, boom, boom. They can hold their attention span. They love it. They have a great time. 2 hours of your day checked off the list.
And it
But
becomes
it
a
was based,
classic in a way because you can
yeah,
repeat it. It's yeah, I find
yeah,
like
and it
my family, it's Lego Batman movie is the one. It's like
right,
very simple in concept and idea, of super clever across the board, and it's humor levels everywhere. And to me, I think your original point is that you the talent that is now infused into the marketplace because of
mm-hmm.
layoffs not being captured
Yeah,
by the big corporations are going to do something else. And this
yes,
is like the beginning of every revolution, no matter if it's political or whatever, financial,
yeah,
industrial, whatever. It's giving new power to the people to do something different. And the platforms that have leveled out the playing field,
mm-hmm.
the TikToks
The
and YouTube and
YouTubes,
whatever, allow people to get into the field more easily. And the
mm-hmm.
demand has changed in different areas, like gaming, like distraction media, whatever, social media. The opportunities to get out there and do something unique in career wise. I think we might find that people jump out of their shadow career working in a corporate division at a corporate studio doing corporate work and get into the creative aspects that probably the reason they showed up to Hollywood, get back into the creative field and do creative things with it. We might see a movement. You just have to survive. And I think if I
Yeah,
have any compassion right now, it's, oh, this is stressful because, where do you pay your big mortgage from?
yeah, right, right. And especially when you're living in an area like LA where it's expensive, and I mean, I think again, it just goes back to it's sort of all tying together in my mind because I've been reading a lot of articles. Like there was an article about 3 weeks ago that was talking about sort of the calcification, the agency world, where CAA was started by Ovitz and a bunch of guys who just left William Morris in the middle of the night, and just started an agency, and it became the big powerhouse. And then eventually Ovitz and his team were pushed out by Richard Lovett and Brian Lord and that pack of guys. And then you have Ari Emanuel who snuck out of I think he was also William Morris
Yeah.
to start Endeavor. And it's
Endeavor.
just
Yeah.
and it's like you don't really it's interesting, like it's almost like people are clinging because they don't want to take the risks anymore. And so they hang on and stay at a job that's a steady paycheck and it pays well. And let's not forget that some of the perks to the industry are nice.
Mm-hmm.
And they just hang on and they just don't want to rock the boat. Whereas it feels like 20, 30 years ago, even the industry started a bunch of people who just wanted to rock the boat, like the Warner Brothers, because they're celebrating the 100th anniversary. They just were a bunch of guys from like Niles, Ohio, and I think Newcastle, Pennsylvania, who went out, bought cheap land in LA, and started this wildly successful movie studio. And it's like I don't know if it's something that's cultural or if it's just because of the uneasiness of the last pretty much since I would argue since 2008, it's crash of '08. It's sort of been there's just this uneasiness about how you can build a sustainable career. But a lot of people are now sort of like, I want to build a sustainable career, but I don't want any of this. Like the general thing is you're going to have peaks and valleys, right? But the general trend is going to be up. But everybody just wants this now.
They just want it. Yeah. Can
They
you
just
keep
want
it
it to go
smooth?
straight up,
I
nice.
want promises. Yeah.
I just want to have my job forever, never have to
Yeah.
worry. And I'm like, but it's the sort of the, I would say it's the valleys that sort of inspire change and are the more rewarding parts of your life. I
Well,
mean,
we've
granted, when
also
you're
talked
actually
about
going
plenty in
through
the
it,
past about the, we'll say lack of youthful quality of the industry in some segments when it comes to
yes,
leadership.
right.
And this is a moment where, often in layoffs, it's the less experienced people that are the ones
Yeah,
that you are moving out because you want the
right.
experience stay in there. And then you get
Yeah.
even a greater divide of, we'll say, youth and experience. Well, where does the revolution take place? On the streets. It takes place in giving people the needs to provide for themselves or evolve into something. And when you give them a lot of time because you've laid them off and infusion with other resources, their friends who also got laid off, you can
Mm-hmm.
create little pockets of movement. And we
Right.
might begin to see this evolution of youth kick itself back into it, where you
Well,
get
yeah, and there's,
Bob
yeah,
Evans
and
at Paramount, where like
right.
big, amazing moves to take place with youthful quality.
Well, it's funny because I know when Charlie Bluthorn of Gulf and Western hired Bob Evans, everyone was like, "What the hell are you doing, man? He's like a failed actor. He's mid-30s. Give me a break." And then he ends up taking Paramount on one of its most glorious runs ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you watch The Offer, there's
Oh yeah, I
which
love
is
that. It was good.
which
Yeah.
is there's aspects of it that aren't great, but the sort of like Matthew Good is the actor who plays Bob Evans, does a phenomenal job sort of encapsulating sort of
Yeah,
the sort of
Booby.
ups and downs of being in that role, and like the
Yeah.
charisma that it takes to make things happen in the just in general. And it's like, is there anyone like, would Bob Iger today hire someone who was 35 to run Disney? Not in your life. No way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to happen. Would Tom Rothman hire someone to run Sony Pictures who's 32? No. And I think that's sort of the evolution that,
Well,
I mean, it's not
even
necessarily that they have to be, super young, but maybe like they need to bring new ideas to the table. And with the pending writer's strike, that's even going to be a more of an idea of like, where do we, I mean, where what is going to transform in the industry in this particular strike? Because if we recall, the last strike sort of brought the huge boom in reality TV
that's exactly
that
what
we,
I'm saying. I think you're going to
right.
create a major infusion and even simplify the idea of you don't have a younger person run a studio. Spielberg was 21, 22 when he did Jaws. Like he was,
He was 25, 26, I think.
oh, was he? Okay. Yeah.
I
No,
think
so I
so.
guess
I'm not
it's
entirely
dual.
sure, but
He got his first stuff in his early
yeah,
twenties.
he was early
One
20s.
of the
Yeah.
first films I worked on was with the Hughes brothers. I think they might have been 19 when they made Dead Presidents or 20. They're even just filmmaking given to the youth. I don't know if I can think of any teenage or early 20 directors that have popped out of nowhere in the last 10 years that I can identify. I feel like there's going to be a movement and change. And I don't want to say I'm looking forward to the writer strike, but I'm curious of what's going to come because of it.
Yeah. I mean,
And I
I
know it's
think,
going to be an exciting, there's going to be a movement that takes place and we're going to be witnessing this movement and
right.
capturing it and understanding what's happening there. And that's really interesting to me because that's how evolution works, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is because I mean, Richard Rushfield, a friend of our beloved Hollywood of Hollywood Breaks and writer and header in chief of the Ankler, wrote a piece this past week about sort of the strike. And, the consensus seems to be it's going to happen. It'll probably be a short one, but it's going to happen. But then there's also the chance that it's going to be longer, like the one in '08 was long. And it's sort of, or I think it was '07 or '07 and '08. And it's sort of like, would it be bad if it was long? I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't be, because maybe it would force sort of what the next evolution might be. And we're sort of, because in '08, the industry was not hit with massive layoffs before the strike. It was sort of like the strike happened, but everyone was anticipating it because the language between the studios and the Writers Guild was very hot. So everyone sort of like pushed through a lot of stuff, scripts and whatnot, so they knew it was coming. But we have the strike, which still applies, that it is, most studios anticipate it. But we also have these massive layoffs that are also happening. So you have all this talent And, I don't necessarily know, particularly with some of these layoffs, if it's always just going to be the younger set. It might be some of the old guard might get laid off because they're the most expensive. And if it's a layoff that's more cost focused versus headcount focused, which I think a lot of them are, simply because you got to cut the margins a little, what's that going to create? What vacuum is that going to create? And
Yeah.
so it's just sort of, it's a very interesting dynamic, and I'm curious to see how it's all going to shake out, because I don't think we've had a moment like this before, where you've got an unbelievable amount of talent layoffs, or industry layoffs, a strike, and sort of like the one sort of bull in China shop legacy company like Netflix, which has now just become, hey, it's just Netflix. So what's the next evolution?
Yeah.
It
Where's the
should be
next
interesting.
disruption? Well, I'd say
Yeah.
when we named the podcast up, Hollywood Breaks, this is the conversation we knew we were talking about is
Right.
Hollywood breaks. It falls apart. It has aspects of it that are constantly moving and changing, and people
Yep.
struggle within. But every one of those breaks gives you a moment to break into Hollywood,
Yep.
and to get in and to have the breaks and make the breaks and create those opportunities. I think you and I are the two guys in the Muppet Show sitting up in the corner watching the show play off itself right
Making
now.
our side
Like, this is
comments.
what we're here for. We want to watch this thing. I want to be part of the conversation and see what's going on, and grab those insiders that we know and bring them forefront. So I don't know. I feel like for the next few weeks, I know we're going to take a spring break in May and come back maybe after the spring break and cover some of this stuff. But for the next few weeks, we should really kind of be looking at this and having a deeper conversation, because this is what's going on in Hollywood right now, way more than telecasts and award shows.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Pretty
Exciting
cool.
times.
Pretty cool. I always appreciate just the thought process of what it takes to make a career, get yourself into something, and try to navigate through all the decision points. And I know our listeners are probably know people that are related to this right now. So we should say to our listeners out there, like, we appreciate you and we want to hear from you, and give us some of your feedback. And if you want to join us part of the conversation, we'd love to have you part of it. I think this is what we're going to be seeing and hearing and talking about for the next few months. We should start grabbing it as soon as possible and put it out there. Well, I appreciate you, my friend, too.
Likewise.
And all you're doing with Vision Craft Brew, the Founders Brew. I'm pretty sure next week I'm going to be reading this. And
you might. I think I figured out what I'm gonna. I've sort of started to pull back a little bit and start crafting a newsletter that makes it worth everybody's time, versus just trying to encapsulate something every week. So I'm trying to space it out a little more, so I have more time to craft a better newsletter. So now I think I have an idea of what I'm going to write about next week, but we'll see. It might change. Who knows?
You're putting the craft in Vision Craft Brew.
That's right.
All right. Well, have a great weekend.
You too.